Today on In Focus, with award-winning host Yesenia Taveras, right now online is special guest, Married to the Ring Chief Visionary Officer Tanya Williamson on WITN 22. Hello, welcome to In Focus. I'm your host Yesenia Taveras. From corporate to homelessness, from homelessness to success, Tanya Williamson, the Chief Visionary Officer of Married to the Ring, joins me today to share with us the importance of relationship education. She's learned many valuable lessons in her lifetime, and she took those lessons to be the core values of her company, Married to the Ring, to empower individuals, couples, faith-based organizations, and corporations on the importance of having healthy relationships in both the workplace and at home. She joins us now. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Yesenia.
Hi, it's so great to have you on In Focus virtually.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be on In Focus today. The city of Wilmington. Woo, woo, woo.
Yes. So before we actually get into this show, I like to do a little mental health check-in too, being that we're still in this COVID-19 pandemic. The coronavirus is not going away. So how are you handling that, you and your family? How's it going?
Well, I just talked about this earlier today. I did a temperature check in our private Facebook community. I told everyone, listen, we have learned a lot of valuable lessons during COVID. So one, be sure to exercise, which is what we're doing. Make sure you position yourself properly, eat and have the right diet, and also make sure you're able to articulate when you need help. Raise your hand. And so right now I'm able to raise my hand if I need help, and I have a very strong group of professionals all around me, including medical professions.
Yes, and also taking the time out to just rest. So many of us are still on the move. Some of us are trying to just figure life out. It's very important to do that self-care and hit the pause button every now and then, and make sure you take that time to just rest and give yourself that love.
Absolutely. I've been resting in between, but I don't really know what rest is unless I'm having fun. So yes, absolutely. I've been resting in between. Pacing myself is a big word. Yes.
Wonderful. And so, Tanya, for those who don't know anything about you, I haven't met you personally or professionally. I like to do on this show what I call just a small detailed orientation on the background of who the guest is. So for those who are unaware of you and your walk in life, give us a little bit of information in regards to who you are.
Absolutely. So I would like to say that I am just a woman of resilience, right? I'm confident about all of that. I'm going to put it in a few categories so that the audience that's watching today understands that I'm able to relate to multiple areas. So I was a single mother, at the age of 22, a college dropout. I was a corporate executive, lost my job. So I can relate to the corporate market. I can also relate to the fact that my parents were divorced while I was small and being raised interchangeably between both parents. And I also am a divorcee, right? And so, and remarried, right? With blended family. So to all of you out there today, listen, we're in this together. What part can't we touch today?
That's right. And that's what we're hoping to get from your journey. You have so many different components, so many different layers that I feel would be very beneficial for so many individuals within our community, especially right now during the pandemic. So talk to us a little bit about your parents and the influence that they had before the separation and what that kind of looked like for you.
So for me, in terms of my parents specifically, I love both of my parents, and I was raised by two hardworking parents with very good work ethics, but very different backgrounds. Both of them have very big, different backgrounds. My father is a military veteran, and my mother was an entry level claims position individual who served her corporation up through I'm 47 all of my life. And my father was an engineer, electrical engineer, who served with his corporation all the way up through retirement. So one of the things that my parents instilled in me was good work ethics. They instilled in me loyalty. They instilled in me integrity, And most importantly, they instilled in me family, the bond, the unity, and love. And so, I speak very highly of both of my parents.
And now there was a point where your mother remarried. And for those, the children that are watching, the younger adults, or even the adults, talk to us, since you are an expert when it comes to relationship education, how you were able to maneuver through that, and what can we gain in regards to some insight on what could help us during that transition when one of the parents does separate and ends up finding someone else and remarries and still has children to raise.
Well, what's interesting for me is I have to say that I was a little selfish. Now that I go back and I look at that, and I can relate to the young children who are going through blended families in so many ways. One, because for my father, I am the youngest to my father. So, uh, daddy's girl, was my title. I actually was in a place in my early childhood where I just simply idolized him. Like, he was my best friend. I could tell him just absolutely everything. And then I also, had it in my mind that maybe the separation will always come back together. And I didn't realize that it wasn't going to come back together until I was an adult. Even after my mother remarried when I was 14 years old. So at that time, it was difficult for my stepfather because I would always compare the two. Like, if he doesn't do, then I'll go to my father and vice versa, or I'll tell my daddy. So I know what all of that is about. But I have to honestly say I had a very good stepfather. He's now deceased. And so with that being said, I mean, we've seen challenges he tried to navigate through. But one of the good things about it is he never disrespected my father, my biological father, and what my biological father wanted to do within my life.
And it sounds like you had a lot of good influence, structure in your life. But with that can come a small side for children, I should say, of rebellious and just trying to go out and explore things that you've never explored before, especially at a very young age. I would probably say that starts as a teenager for a lot of people. But there was a part in your life where you were kind of curious about the streets, and it kind of drawn you just to the curiosity of to learn what that's kind of like. Talk to us about that part of your life.
So, just to share, and let me just backpedal. It wasn't easy for me with my parents being divorced. We actually probably were in the court system just with me out of the children every year up through the age of 18. So that was definitely an experience for me that affected me adversely, as I learned later on in life. But, you know, with that being said, as I entered into my young adulthood and still had, was playing mama dad against one another, I still was very inquisitive. My father was very structured, and most of a good portion of my life, he raised me single handedly, and he did a phenomenal job. But there was a shelter period of my life where I seen a lot of structure. He included me in corporate settings at a very early age. He partnered me with a law firm to work with at the age of 14. He established all of the right paths for me to navigate through. But I still had this inquisitiveness about, we are doing this, but I want to go over here. All of the things that they would tell me no, I was like, I'm going to try. But Yesenia, listen, that didn't happen at 14, 18. That happened coming out the womb. I've been the challenger since I'm coming out the womb. I always had this inquisitiveness about life. I always wanted to understand. I wanted to do things differently from everyone else. And so, when I was drawn to the streets, it was probably in the most vulnerable part of my life. And that part was when I felt alone, and wanting to feel a sense of community. And so I liked the streets. I found in that period going to certain developments or areas. I learned a sense of community. I learned a sense of sisterhood, where women, we got a code in the street called loyalty. There were certain things that I could get, and I kind of like that, and I like the thuggish, the things Hair was red. I wear high dresses, whatever. I went through all that, all cycles, you know. It was all good though, because it brings me to where I am today.
And I appreciate that insight because there's so many, like I said, especially the younger generation, who are very curious at such a young age, and they tap into that, and they themselves too are looking for that type of sisterhood, the type of community, something to get involved with. I mean, because let's face it, we all have our family, but then there's that opportunity that life gives you, that you get to grow outside of your family. You meet other people in the community. You build friendships and relationships with other people, and you learn the importance of loyalty. So thank you for giving us that insight. So that way, some people could just better understand, as you're going to teach us in this interview about relationship education. And I think that's a big component of it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, in your young adult life, you decided to attend Delaware State University, in historically Black college university. Talk to us about that opportunity, because there was a part where you didn't complete the 4 years straight. So, talk to us about that whole journey in your life.
So it's funny that you ask, because most people don't even know that I attended Delaware State University. And it's really funny because I wanted to go to Spelman. Like, I wanted to go to Spelman and I did not get in. I was like shy a certain point. And I did not get in at the time. And it was primarily driven as a result of my SAT scores. Um, I'm not a good test taker. I really don't even care about tests, and so that's what happened. And I didn't get in, and I was a little disappointed. And so I chose to go to a local college, and my choice was an HBCU, which was Delaware State University. Upon my arrival, I thought it was God sent. It was the world to me, because I was like, I am out of the house. What? I don't need structure. What? And I'm down here, and then I'm living. I mean, they're laughing. I lived in the worst dorm at Delaware State at the time, but the most historical dorm, which was Tubman, you know? And so, and when I say worst, I'm talking about oldest. Like, everyone else had this modern, and I had this, we all had these older rooms at the time, those who are familiar with it. And while at Delaware State University, my husband, as he would use the word fast tail, I just became fast tail. All of the things I couldn't do at home, I just started doing. And I had a great group of girlfriends, and we just did everything. I attended school. I went to school and did all of the things that I was supposed to do, but I wanted to move fast. And in my second year, going into my sophomore year, my father didn't want me to move off campus. I moved off campus, and that's when things went downhill for me.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because I feel a lot of individuals, they face that when they go to college. That's an opportunity for them not to really just only mature in their own journey, but they're really separated from their parents. For most of us who do get the opportunity to either live on campus or get an apartment close to the college. So you're really getting into your own. You're exploring life in this world in a whole new way. And it's very difficult if you're moving to a whole different state or a college that you have no friends in, no family close by. And so, as you were saying, it can lead you so many different ways. And where do you seek help? Where do you seek companionship? Where do you seek friendship? Where do you find that sisterhood or that brotherhood? So talk to us about what caused you to kind of leave college, but at the same time, find your own in your own journey, your walk.
So what was interesting is, I took my sisterhood into my apartmenthood. And my father primarily was the overseer of my financial piece at that time in my life. And, he was like, this is not what you're going to do. You're not moving in with girls. We don't know their financial situation, etc. We did do that. And then what happened is one of our girlfriends ended up leaving because she couldn't financially support. But we didn't have a curfew. The curfew wasn't there. We didn't have to be in at certain hours. We could do whatever we wanted to do. And we was playing house. So that means that, my other girlfriend, people could spend a night or, just have fun, right? But what happened was I had to pick up a small job. And as I was picking up a small job, I started to work and go to school at the same time. I was feeling a sense of self-sufficiency where I thought that this money was kind of truncating over and finding the balance there. And then I started to date. I dated someone older than I was. And then I had become pregnant, and I actually lost the child and having to move home. This wasn't the style or lifestyle that my father had created a pathway for me, you know? And so, while my mother was a little understanding, I have a military father, a military veteran. Like I said, amazing. We could talk about anything. But in this part of my life, it was very difficult to really share as much because I felt like I was letting my parents down. Like I just wasn't meeting their quota. So then I would start navigating saying, okay, let me keep this self-sufficiency momentum up. Let me go out on my own and try to explore life. It was very tough. It was like trying to figure out like an apartment setting and, all of those good things. But I still had a little bit of backing, but not like I would have because my parents had already extended what they should have at that hour. And now I was just taking a leap of finding my identity throughout life at the age of 20, really 2021.
And let's talk about the companionship part. Although I know you're not with that individual anymore, but I feel like there's a lot of young girls who are in college who are experiencing that. There's a quote out there that's for some, they find their husband in college, and for the rest of us, we don't. So, but it can make that huge decision for a young woman to pick education or companionship because I do want to eventually get married, but at the same time, I want to graduate. And you just shared with us how making that one decision actually deviated your path and your trajectory in regards to graduating on time from a university. And you found yourself in a tough situation. What could you share with those women who are actually experiencing that right now?
Yeah, so I would like to share because my path was chemical engineer. That's where I was going, and what deviated me is that, having a miscarriage and then having to go through everything mentally. I didn't think I needed treatment, nor did I think I needed to talk about it, but I was heading south, right? And I wasn't vocal about it at that moment. I just kept doing what I needed to do, and I slid into this relationship. So at this point, I felt like I needed to stay in the relationship um, because I was all caught up. That's the word that they use. I was all caught up. Well, maybe we create this family and we do all of this. And I did. I have my son, but we don't have a family, because we were not compatible. As I started to mature, as I started to see a level of responsibilities, my value system, his value system was very different. And now it was like I felt obligated, like we had to stay here. This is what we're going to do. And I got to figure it all out. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that I had parents um, who figured it all out along the way. And so not in a bad way, but for me personally, it was just like in the back of my head, I can't let my parents down. And now that I have this child, I can't let this child down. So what do I do? So I just start sliding into more of accepting roles and responsibilities that I just really wasn't prepared for.
So you did end up having a son, and how did that alter your life, becoming a new mother, not graduating from the university, knowing the importance of succeeding in life, or I should say moving further in life? In America, they really are big on you having at least a 4-year degree or an associate's degree. What was next for you?
Well, the stigma at that time, and my father saw it, like my father's very business oriented, right? And it was like, oh my God, it's almost like I can't speak for him because he's not here, but I'm thinking in my head, I'm doomed for failure, So if I can at least show that I can work and get my child benefits, myself benefits, have my own place and try to figure this thing out. And this is where my my mother and my stepfather really came in and helped with support of altering schedules to help me in terms of raising him. But my son was my deliverer. I call him the deliverer because of the simple fact that he caused me to wake up. Like you're not in a dream no more. Like this is real life, and hey, you can't play. You can't play with this thing anymore. You really need to find a path. So as I entered into corporate America, at an entry level of $17,000 a year, because I had no degree, and I entered, that's when, the funds would take care of all of us. But I knew the importance of a career path because my father had already embedded that into me. I was the president I attended like junior achievements, president's clubs, fame. I'm an alum of fame and all these different outlets that he had me involved in, right? And cheerleading. And so I traveled, very young age. And so it was just like, okay, let's take some of those skills and figure out how we can put it together. And I got this child over here. And I would take my infant or my son, I would take him out and teach him etiquette classes at restaurants. Like, we're going to sit here. This is what you're going to do. You're not going to be that child. And I grew with my son. We grew together.
And you begin to work in corporate America, you were saying, while being a mother. And you end up relocating to Frederick, Maryland at one point in your career. And in that part of your journey, you were, I should say, one of the most prominent African Americans in that company, taking leadership roles. So as you just mentioned to us, you started at a $17,000 salary, but you quickly found yourself getting promotions within your career. Talk to us about that length span in your life and what that looked like in corporate America for us.
Well, it was amazing. I have a book titled The Setback Fueled My Faith, which we just released last year. And it was amazing for me because I thought at this point I had beat the stigma. Like I can't believe it. I'm a single mother. And at that time, during that period, I did get married, right? Because I got a second child. But I said in my book, I was quickly climbing the corporate ladder in the financial services industry. I received countless promotions and finally earned that six-figure salary by the age of 30, right? To me, it was amazing because African-American women who did not have a college degree and earning six figures was less than 1% at that time in America. So for me, I was like, listen, like almost like, hey, dad, hey, mom, I'm on performance. I did this thing without that thing you said that I needed, right? But that suddenly changed. When I relocated, I talk about it again in my book, chapter that I quickly refer to, and it's called The Price Was Right. That's what I call it in chapter 2. The price was right. So what happened was it looked so good. I'm not going to lie to you, Yesenia. Like, I'm like, listen, I ain't got no cares in the world. I got so much money on my mind. So, look, and it wasn't about the money for me. It was about the results. I'm a drive the results girl. So I was happy that I was impacting the lives of people. We were building and fostering an environment in the workplace that was just really healthy. I really worked alongside. I had a team of tenured people that was just simply amazing. Right? Wasn't amazing in the beginning because I was this young girl and some of them was like, I'm your grandmother's age and all these other good things. And they took me through the process, but I made it through. I made it on the other side. But when I relocated, it was a culture shock for me because I worked at a corporate location where we had an open door policy, right? So that means that execs were all over the place. And as I was climbing corporate ladder as an exec, to me, it wasn't abnormal. But I had relocated to a site where diversity wasn't present. And it was scary to me because I was trying to integrate a culture from where I came from to a remote location where it was not open door policy. So me vocalizing, expressing, I'm already that kid outside the box. And then I'm Black. So at that point, I was like, all odds are against me. And so it didn't feel good at all.
And so we are talking about how it affected you. What were some of the techniques, or were you able to maneuver through that? Because there's a lot of us, even myself as a Latina, we find ourselves amongst the 1% within our company. There's not a lot of us working with each other. So being that you were the 1% in your organization at the time, how did you maneuver through that, having to work with other, or I should say, a diverse population, other ethnicities, and really trying to represent not only who you are as a person, but the ethnicity, your ethnicity that you're representing? How were you able to make this all happen but still stay afloat?
What was interesting, when I relocated, some of the peers, because at that time we were going through several acquisitions and mergers. So some of the peers had relocated directly to that area as well. They were my colleagues that I worked alongside with, and now we're relocated, but we still had to create hierarchy structures. And some of them, I reported to. So they were familiar with my performance. They were familiar with my track record. But because we were doing so many consolidations, so many mergers, acquisitions, that culture became a backstabbing culture. So it was almost like I was like set up, where the culture I came from, even the CEO who had taken over the final acquisition had a meeting with all of us execs and said, listen, you go to the room, you fight this thing out, you talk about it, you walk out the room, and then you shake it off. So I had worked around a ton of men at my level, but I also had supervisors who reported to me that were majority males. And so I wasn't used to going to a location where people were like they were just backstabbing. And so here I am taking my corporate location. Listen, we don't do that. Like we don't do that. Let's go in the room. Let's fight this out. And then guess what? Let's breathe. It's okay. It's not personal. And but that wasn't the case. Words were getting twisted. There was a lot of manipulation because people were afraid of losing their job. And because they had become afraid of losing their job, they were trying to do it at any cost to save their own personal job, because they wanted that next level or next position or relocation in the event that site closed. So it wasn't a pretty picture. I mean, I started to move into nurturing my staff, but then I would get penalized for nurturing my staff to say that is not the kind of culture that we have here. In addition to that, I had my colleagues or my peers that were afraid to even engage with me in any transaction because they in fear of what they knew that I was being set up. So in fear of the retaliation would happen directly to them. So they just pretty much, withdrew. And it was a very lonely place because here I am relocated. I'm not with my family. My children are here attending school in the presence, but then I would go home, and that's when it would bleed into my personal life. Like I'm like, oh man, this is like I don't want to go to that place. I've tried, and I would create all different types of channels, but at that time, having a Black woman at my age, being in that position was not a welcoming place.
Now, I'm so glad you're very transparent because there's so many women in general and then young women who could relate to your story, especially the higher ranks that we get into, as you mentioned, are mostly men there at the table. And so, and then it's not a very diverse population of men. So just being able to be transparent with that part of your journey, I truly appreciate it. I'm pretty sure a lot of women are able to take away from that. But share with us how you noticed the gap of the diversity inclusion within your company. But although you went through those experiences, in some way, somehow you were able to promote and foster the culture of diversity and inclusion in your life. How were you able to do that?
I was able to do that because my foundation of me being reared at the corporate headquarters. Like sometimes I get teary eyes about this because, I had executives who took the time to invest, and they weren't Black males. One was, which was eventually became my leader, but a Caucasian male. He took the time and said, you know how to get to where you're going, but you have raw talent. So we're going to take the time and teach you the how. And, the moments where I felt like tears would roll down my eyes in leadership, instead of the whole room saying, suck it up, as they always would, like, suck it up. You got to suck it up. He would pause and say, wait, Tanya, tell me how you feel. How are you feeling? And let's work on that area. Let's pull it out. So I would read all kinds of leadership books, and he would take me through all types of conflict resolution scenarios. And then I would get tested, and he was saying, okay, now let's apply it, and so that was the foundation of what I had learned. That's why I had a difficulty when I relocated, because I'm like, this isn't D&I. You guys don't even work at corporate. But one of the issues we found out is because that site still was migrating and going through an acquisition of an older culture from another financial institution, they hadn't had a chance to really reshape that culture yet to look like our culture, which was very difficult.
And this is so great to hear because especially in the moments we're living in right now, diversity inclusion has always been a big issue, but I feel like it's in the forefront now because of the Black Lives Matter movement, what's been going on in our country, with the killings and things of that nature. It's really bringing it to light in regards to a situation, an issue that's been prominent within our country for many, many years. And the fact that you can speak to it on the corporate side, inside the boardroom, is a true testament to where all areas in our country we can find room for improvement.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love it because now in the position that I'm in, we used to say, people would come into corporations and train us, right? And they would do training. We're like, yeah, they don't know our life. They're just trainers. But now that, with my experience in going in and being able to talk to C-suite executives, middle management, because of sitting at those positions, it's like, oh, you understand our life. Not only can you relate to it, you know what? I'm okay. I can receive the correction from you because you're absolutely right. I need to change X, and in order for everything else to move forward downward. And I believe that D&I starts at the top. You can't work from the bottom up. If it doesn't start with the leader of that department, then that means that we could do everything we want in between. But guess what? We're still going to be toxic from above.
That's right. And you've been able to make so much transition and just success happening within the company, and especially when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And after working for 14 years, you've had 9 promotions at your company. You're doing so well. But I want to share this part of your journey because what comes with success also comes with setbacks. And a lot of people tend to not see that part of people's lives because all we post on social media or all you'll see in certain interviews on the networks is just the success part of it. But there's a lot of setbacks that comes with success. And for you, after 14 years with 9 promotions, you were laid off. You were done with the company. And for a lot of people, especially right now during this pandemic, it's very devastating because 14 years, 20 years, even just 2, 3, 4, 5 years is a lot of years of your life that you're spending more time in the workplace as opposed to home with your family. And this is a huge part in your journey that is very devastating, and it could actually end the trajectory of one person's life if their mental health is not there. So take us to this part of your life and share with us what this looked like for you and how you were able to just really redeem yourself and change your mindset in regards to moving forward.
Yes. So, one of the things that really is interesting about my story is I'm transparent, I'm very honest, and I'm forthright, So I'm that girl that if I always tell people, I'll tell my story before you tell my story because, I want others to know my journey, and I want you to see that we make mistakes. I love when President-elect Joe Biden said, listen, I made a mistake when he talked about mass incarceration. And, I made a mistake, because of the pressure, because of everything that was going on in corporate. I was traveling. I talk about it in my book. I was traveling. And at the time, I double booked, and I was let go off of my company for grounds that I don't believe were right grounds. However, at this point, my life changed suddenly, right? My life changed suddenly, meaning that I woke up to a culture shock, meaning that everything was changed and I was in denial, not denial of the fact that I lost my job. I was in denial about the fact that, oh, I'm just going to hurry up and get back on my feet. Like, this is going to happen. I'm just going to transfer all of this over and it's just going to be like, boop, like, and so for 1 year, I was like, I took all of my investments, my pension, like I took everything out, pretending to live a life as if it was going to be the same life at that moment. Because making my salary at an early age, most people will receive that in their retirement, on a monthly basis. But I had already earned what a retirement looked like on a monthly basis in such a short period of time. And so that journey was devastating for me because, Yesenia, it happened one day after my 31st birthday.
Wow.
So what happened was just, it was like every day, like it was like, oh my God, are we kidding me? And so for 1 year, I pretended as if, like I'm okay, like, we'll pay the bills over here, go send, go do this, XX, right. keep buying, as if we're still, let's do this. But then one day I had to wake up and say, this isn't working. Like, this isn't happening. And that's when I realized for the first time that what my parents told me, like that immediate gratification had caught up with me. And not only immediate gratification, when I talk about immediate gratification, I'm talking about the fact that I did not have a degree. So we're talking like now, 9 years later, that is the thing. Like, it's competitive. You can't get into leadership without a degree. It's now a requirement. And I'm like, I didn't listen to my parents because of the immediate gratification. Number two, here it is. I'm raised by, a father and a mother who has been employed with their companies all of my life. How do I even go and communicate and say, listen, I failed? Because I don't know what it's looked like. I wasn't raised by parents who had multiple jobs. My parents had the same job when I was born to the time that they retired. So I don't know what that looks like. Number three, I didn't know anything about domestication, Yesenia. Meaning I had a maid, I had like, it was crazy, like living between two states. Everything my mother was trying to tell me to do, I realized that I needed to learn how to do. I didn't know how to cook. My mother still traveled in and did all of my meals. And most importantly, I made all that money and I blew all of that money because I didn't have financial literacy, So I wasn't investing the right way because I always thought that money will always be there.
Right.
Sad to say, it was gone. So feeling all of that, I went through a period where I was a little ashamed. And I would pretend with my mother, like she would think I was traveling because that's what I would do. She would think I was traveling so the kids would have a home at her place. And I would just be like, I'm dropping the kids off because they had space, right? And I'll be back. But really, I was sleeping in my car. I was starting to lose everything. Like, and trying to keep them in private school, I was trying to lose it. It was like everything was coming, but I didn't know who to turn to because remember, when you are at that level and it's less than that percent, oftentimes you can't fall back on anyone else because you were the one making it. And so, at that time, remember, I'm married. Marriage wasn't going well. Now I'm going through a divorce, lost a job, Delaware government, the state I live in. When the laws were created, the man made a lot of the money. But unfortunately, in my case, Delaware is an equitable distribution state. So this is when the regulations and the laws did not work in my favor in my divorce because I was the breadwinner, with the average income of the six figures for 3 years. So I was just hit from every angle, and there was nothing the judge could do because that was the law.
Mm-hmm. And so what happens next? I mean, I can only think about the fear, the anxiety. Where do I get my answers from? Who do I reach out to? This is the perfect time to have a mentor. I don't have a mentor. How do I navigate through this? I mean, what happens? Because there is a part where you become homeless and you do have your child to raise. So take us through that.
So it's funny. I was going to church still wearing my suits, like my little mask, the mask, like I'm good. And a lady, we call it in the church world, she ministered to me and said that there's something that you have to do. And I was like, I know. Like, inside I knew, but I didn't want to tell anyone. And so that's where the pride came in, and this is why I tell people, raise your hand. Don't sit there. Pride stepped in, whereas I was just like, I can't talk to anyone. I can't talk to my parents. I mentioned it briefly to my father. Like, me and my dad talked about everything, the whole world. But my dad was like, you're going to be okay. You're going to bounce right back, And I was like, I didn't know how to go back and say, I'm not bouncing back. It's not working for me, Dad. And then I got this marriage that just ain't working. And so I ended up in the shelter. And I went through the process, but my situation wasn't like anyone else's. It was very different. It was unique. It was just that I was hit so hard with so many barriers of financials. And I wasn't, I was only making probably less than, like you could say, like a $30,000 salary that I had picked up, but less than that, because by the time they took taxes out, it was very different than what I was making and then paying the divorce. So it was interesting. So when I entered into the shelter, I still was in denial, like this is going to recover. I just need some help. And this is why I'm so passionate about the underserved market. I went to social services to get help. I was like $2 off. Like I was like, I need help. you know?
That can be.
And it was crazy. I was like, I paid into the system. This is me. I paid into the system. I paid for everybody else. And now I need help and no one can help me. But when I got in that shelter and it was labeled as homeless, the world stepped in to help me. And I didn't, I would say it's a win-win, but why do we have to go there before we can get help? Like it was almost like the epidemic right now, what we're facing. I mean, but basically it was just, from that standpoint. And from the shelter, that's where my journey begins. And my journey in the shelter, um, to me was almost like boot camp because I had a very good case manager. But when I got there, I was like, here's my plans. I used to donate to this place and used to take care of other families. I still was in denial, like, oh, I want to be treated like this. And then she brought me down like a couple notches and said, listen, Tanya, we're not going to let you do anything for the next few months. And I'm thinking like, no, we're not going to do that. We need to deal with your emotional. You're in denial. And that's when I started getting therapy and didn't realize how sick I had become from holding in all of that for a year. Like it was almost like a sigh of relief, like, wow, I didn't even know what therapy was until I went there. I didn't know what emotional wellness was because in corporate America at that time, I worked. I worked all the time. I kept my kids on my hip in conference rooms. Just it wasn't, I didn't know when not to stop. And now this reality check came in and I had to stop.
And that's very a frightening situation. You shared with us a few things here. Having at the point in your life at one point where you're making too much money to get help. And there's a lot of women who go through that, especially women who are taking care of a child with special needs, and they go to Social Security to get some income, and they're denied because their salary is of greater of that than what is required, and they need help. Co-pays are more than they can bear. Hospital bills are over their head in regards to the amount of time their child has to stay in the hospital. Medical bills are through the roof. But then you have the other side of it where you've been laid off, you have no money, and now you can get the help by entering a homeless shelter. And there's a lot of women who, even through domestic violence situations with their intimate partner or with their spouses, that is the first thing that they tell them is do not go home, go to a shelter. And for so many of us, for so many women, that's a very scary situation to be in, especially the stories that you see in movies, on different networks. And it's like, am I getting myself into that? I don't, me and my child, we deserve better than that. There's no way I'm putting myself in there. But when you're really with no more options, nowhere to go, and that is where you have to go to have some type of shelter over your roof, roof over your head for you and your child, you took that in. Paint for us, because I want to get away from that stigma that homeless shelters are not a place to go to when you're at need, because you took that opportunity for you and your child. So for those women who are currently at this fork in the road right now, where they want to get out from, like, let's just say, for example, a domestic situation, and they do have that opportunity to seek shelter at a homeless shelter before getting on their own feet to get the security deposit to go into an apartment, this is an opportunity for them. So since you've been through those shoes, you've walked that walk, you've lived in the homeless shelter while you're raising your child as a single mother and also trying to find a job, talk to that one woman who's currently in that shoe right now, or many.
Yeah, so it's not a good feeling first because you have to ask for help, especially if you've been self-sufficient, right? I've been there. So I know when I went through the case management process, it was intense. And then there was one who applied some soft skills And I actually now advocate and did right before my exit of the shelter by speaking quarterly to human service majors at University of Delaware on eliminating and minimizing the stereotypical views of what they perceive as homeless. And trying to make sure that they understand that if they're burnt out, be very mindful because the person is already in a state of sensitivity. Because what I had seen specifically in the shelter is I was already broken, and sometimes some people in human service. So if I had to talk to anyone, I talked to them because I saw a lot of we don't want to be abused again. We're already broken. And to that specific audience, some of them are burnt out because they see repeat cycles and they tend to exhaust their burnout on the incoming people that are broken. And so I talked to that population heavily because that's where I've seen the issues. And the moment that I was allowed to enter after going through a very intense interview, it wasn't until tears rolled down my eyes because I felt already humiliated, is where one case manager said, "Hold up, let's stop. Let's just let her in." So in that process, I would say to people, you may deal with it and it's common because that's what's entering, but be very sensitive to the people that's coming into the process. And I would say to the mother, my first night wasn't the best night. And I remember the lady today. And like, if I see her and she follows me on Facebook, I give her so much love. As I entered in and moved in, the window was broken in my room, right? And then, depending upon the child's age, my son had to sleep in the room next to me, but no one was in the room with him. And that was already a culture shock. And then my daughter. And for me, being like an eagle, a mother, I just asked the person, her name was Miss Bav, could I please just sleep in they had like a lobby room, like where the TV was, and just hold my kids for my first night, because it was such an emotional moment. And so we got through it. They fixed I'm sorry. I just remember it as if it was yesterday. So they fixed the window, and then I had heat the next day, but it still was an adjustment because in the shelter you deal with uh recovering addicts, which was a different environment for me, but it was the best learning experience for me. And you deal with people who have been abused, or people who have gone through the system repeatedly. What I did get from the shelter was that sense of uh, uh, piece where we all work together. Like we all were homeless. So that meant that if we had two pair of shoes and your child needed a shoe, we just said your child take one shoe and we take this shoe because we couldn't store anything in there anyways. So it was almost like we found a way to gel that took me back to diversity and inclusion. I managed various layers. So I said, okay, so how do I relate and listen and play the role that I'm supposed to play at this hour, which is to be peer to peer with my peers, because we're all in the same situation. And we created such a unique sisterhood, and if any of them run into me today, that doesn't change the dynamics. I probably would do anything for them, because of the simple fact that we looked out for one another, but that took that love journey that took us just respecting each other's space because we all had a need. So if you were to get anything, from me, is you you have to adjust your you have to adjust to the role. You may not like the role. It may be very uncomfortable for you, but adjust to it. Don't succumb to it. Means that you become a byproduct of it. No, you adjust, you relax in it, and then you start writing out a strategic vision like I did. I put paper, napkin, pen to that floor in that one room, and I start writing out vision as if I was outside of that place. and everything that I wrote out is still happening today in my life.
And your journey really just humanized everything about you. And that's what I just love about your story, because in this certain situation, you lost it all, and you could have lost yourself. And then in the midst of it, you could have lost your children to foster care and things. So many things could have happened during this transition in your life, but you stuck on and you held on to the one main goal, which is, like you said, this is temporary. Let me just live in this moment and figure it out, create a strategic plan. And that's what you did. You went from, being so successful in corporate America, 14 years with 9 promotions, to becoming homeless, becoming a divorcee, a single mother, raising your kids on your own in the homeless shelter. But then there's a part in your life, and I really want to get to this part, where you turn it all around. And not only did you turn it all the way around, you went in. Like, you went from a point in your life going to Delaware State University, dropping out of college, to now you hold 4 degrees. And that takes a lot of commitment, a lot of dedication. I mean, this is the good stuff, but I wanted to take time in the beginning of the show to show people where you came from to where you're at now. And that's just a true testament, Tanya, to your just desire to want more for yourself, for your children, and for our community. And you took everything that you've learned through your journey and you've applied it to not only your success, but also to your business. So let's get to that point in regards to you earning these 4 degrees, how you made it happen, and how you turned all your pain and you took that and made it your purpose to create your own business.
Yeah. So, Yesenia, you're really touching my soul today, right? So, it's really funny because, people are saying, why are you so passionate about what we quote unquote call the hood, right? Well, I would like to say that while I was in the shelter, the hood made sure my children were safe and going to school, because the shelter wouldn't allow my children to stay in private school because it wasn't a part of their criteria, although the private school offered to pay for their education. And so that was really big for me. So in doing that, I said, there's a few things that I need to do. I need to come up with some solutions, right? So while I was in the shelter, and my colleagues who live with me could attest, I started doing situational models because I helped other women while I was there. That was my way of giving back. As I was building my educational plan, I was helping other women go back and get their GEDs, helping other women go back and pursue paths for education. The shelter at the time paid for me to go back and pursue my bachelor's. Although I didn't conclude with my bachelor's in the shelter because I came out of the program, I had graduated from the program. I knew that I had to continue that path until I, you know, finalized everything. So I entered it back into corporate at an individual contributor level, although it was salary, but I entered back into corporate, and that corporation helped extend and pay for my further education until I had exited out of that corporation. The second, that was a layoff. And so different circumstance, but it's just more consolidation mergers. And so we had a layoff. By that time, was right in the middle of my master's. And I then, graduated with my master's, or I graduated then. I got the timetable. But the amazing part about all of that is every area that affected me was every area that I went back to pursue. So my undergrad was business because I was finding my way and working with different scenarios in a human service, even though that's not my field. I was learning that as I was going along. And then in the shelter, I birthed my first business. In the most toughest time, I birthed my first business. And in birthing my first business, I paid off all debt while I was in the shelter. I paid off all debt. I had several success stories, and I was honored by the shelter as well as the state as a result of that. Now, leading into my exit from the shelter, I continue to further my degree. So I do carry 4. So I carry 4 of those puppies. And one is a concentration. My last one is an MBA with a concentration in Homeland Security because of the regulatory issue on why I was dismissed in my first opportunity. I didn't feel it was right. And I said I would beat the system and make sure I understand regulations as a whole. So I wanted to make sure privatization between government and private sectors. So that was the degree I pursued. I did all of that while working with my children. I have a challenge. I'm very competitive, right? So in the shelter, me and my children, we had like schedules. No one in that shelter could tell me. My kids was always with me. Listen, if you were doing algebra, I was doing economics. So we would sit down and we would do everything all the way out. So I said that my children had to pursue. They could not beat me in getting my degree. So as they were graduating from one source, maybe it was junior high to high school, I was graduating alongside of them. The same year my son graduated is the same year I graduated. It was just like we were running in tandem because I wanted to raise a bar for my children to say that you can do anything. They may say, I speak to that parent right now, that parent that is upset because your child dropped out. Don't get upset. They'll go back. They'll finish it. Let them navigate through. But the difference about me returning to school and getting those degrees was the fact that now I had real life application because I had already done all of that. I just didn't have the academic insight coupled with it in order to execute. So school was a lot easier for me. And that pushed me into my second marriage. But in my second marriage, I paused a little bit on pursuing my doctorates, and I watched my husband, who during our marriage worked from getting his bachelor's, who graduated with his doctorates. So so in 8 years he was able to get his undergrad all the way to his doctorates. Wow. And so I took a sacrifice of back seat, and then now I'm pursuing and moving forward in my doctorates. And so it was just to balance us out accordingly. And so that's exactly how, and now we have one that's about to graduate and with their undergrad. But it's just to stretch the kids to say, listen, this is what we're going to do. And we don't want to be disqualified, because I was disqualified in entering back into the market because I didn't have degrees. But I have a very diversified portfolio, which covers government, corporate, and also the private sector and small business and entrepreneurial. And so that holds it all.
And through all those experiences and in your journey, you went ahead and established those lessons as your core value for Married to the Ring. Talk to us about what Married to the Ring is, what relationship education looks like, and how you're doing this not just for individuals and couples, but also for faith-based organizations and corporations.
So, just to share with you guys, I'm just going to point you directly to our website, marriedtothering.com, right? I'm pointing you there because people ask me questions about Married to the Ring as a whole. And when I really tell them I'm serving all markets, they're like, you can't be. You just can't be. Well, I am. I am. What I mean by that is that I am super duper excited because I've taken my experience and I've actually shifted it, where now I'm able to go back into corporations. I'm excited to announce that we have received our National Minority Supplier Diversity certificate, which is the highest level of certificate for minorities on the corporation sector, where we can buy and do business with corporations. And that's because now I can bring my training into the workplace. I've partnered with one of the leading universities out west that really has a very strong integrated curriculum, as well as creating my own content and working with our lawyers carefully. And then on the government side, I am on this mission to be able to change the climate of how state employees relate and interact with one another with diversity and inclusion, because a corporate environment is very different and a state environment is very different because it is governed by legislation. And so that we have that sector. And then we also have individuals and couples. So I can talk to, the single mother. I can talk to the mother who had a failed marriage. I was there, and I can talk to the mother who remarry, and the second marriage is even harder, until you get tools, right? So I have that population. And then I have the incarcerated population, which I'm extremely excited. We got some great things coming down the pipeline for that population. Why? Because in my mother's remarriage, I don't call him my stepbrother. He's my brother. He was, a drug dealer and is incarcerated for those reasons. And as it relates to that, I promise that I would provide solutions and transformative models to that market and be able to relate. Military, I'm coming for that market because a lot of young people get married prematurely due to benefits, and people don't understand your choices directly affect or adversely affect your children, sliding into relationships because you just find it a lot easier instead of developing the right strategies to become sustainable and successful. So I'm pointing you to the website, marriedtothering.com, where I say it, my mission is I teach individuals how to walk boldly out of hard times and into their winning seasons. But we also, are tackling things globally. I'm excited to say that I graduated from Delaware's Export Tech program, where our plans are underway to export services for violence against girls and women for sports organizations across the world. And we do have the boxing ring simulator. Why is that so passionate to me? And I don't want to tear up again. It's because at the age of, I think it was 16, my best friend's mother was murdered by her father. And it's still, I remember it as today, and since then, I didn't realize until I went to college, I didn't even know what molestation was. I didn't know what sexual assault was. But one out of every three girls are sexually assaulted. And it was like, I'm coming for this market. I just want to hold this market and I want to help this market through and recover carefully through relationship education, that passive aggressive kind of things and what looks like toxic and what isn't. And so because of that, that's what we're doing. We're serving those markets accordingly, and it's really big for us and corporations, especially going back, teaching the relationship intelligence. So it's a relationship education based organization, evidence proven over 25 years material we've integrated into our model, and serves 15 countries of 5 languages. But what's unique about us is we have components that is really life changing. Like we have a masterclass coming up, right? This Saturday, talking about communication, the unmet communication needs. You definitely want to join that because it's 90 minutes. You're going back into, we might be going back into quarantine. I don't know. But right now, you got to know how to master yourself. I tell everyone this pandemic is about you. You got to learn how to master yourself. And sometimes we don't want to look at ourselves. I can't change my husband, but I can change myself. And I can share with people how those tools allowed me to navigate through and still be married with my husband. We've had bouts. People didn't think we were going to make it. I didn't think we were going to make it. I wanted to get rid of that joker, Yesenia. But we made it. And I have to really give credit to God. That is my faith. But not only give credit to God, what's most important to me is moving under healthy teaching, under my leadership, Pastor Jerome Lewis and Sister Lewis, the teaching, just sitting from afar while I heal, listening to the teaching, and then also just giving credit to a very supportive family, of parents who really love me. And then, as you know, my husband, Mr. Gerald Williamson. So
wonderful. I truly appreciate the time you took here with us to share with us your journey. And in regards to your husband, that's what we call in corporate America, the powerhouse. You find someone to help you build an empire. And it sounds like you've been able to really turn your life around with not only your husband, but with your children, being a mother and everything, and just really taking, like we said in the beginning of the show, going from corporate to homelessness to success. Your journey is a true testament that it is possible. And just keep the course and don't give up, and work on your mental health. As you mentioned, a huge component of that too was seeking therapy, knowing that it's okay to get that help and removing that stigma, because in the end, it's ultimately about you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And before we leave, is there anything else you would want to share with our audience?
I would just say, learn more about Married to the Ring, at marriedtothering.com. We're available on all social channels. What's very good is that our services are incorporated for all people. You know, as a minority owned enterprise, I made sure that we created channels for all people, you know, and I think that that's what's most important in this hour. We all are in this together. We had a phrase, stronger together, you know, fearless alone, but you're stronger together. And I would say, Yesenia, thank you for having me on today's show. I truly appreciate it. And I give shouts out to my amazing children. I love you guys. And G. Williamson, you already know I love you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Like I said, it's been a true pleasure to have you on In Focus. You're so transparent. I really, truly appreciate that in Focus, because that gives our viewers the opportunity to learn what you went through, but not only that, the steps that can ultimately help them as well as they maneuver through their life and their journey as well. So thank you so much. It's been a true honor.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Yesenia.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for watching this episode of In Focus. It's been a true honor to bring before you the story behind Tanya Williamson, the Chief Visionary Officer of Married to the Ring. For future showings of In Focus, be sure to follow us on Facebook at WITN22Wilm and by subscribing to our YouTube channel at WITN Channel 22. I've been your host, Yesenia Taveras. I'll see you again soon.
Hello, I'm Stacey Burwell, and I'm currently a member of the Global 7 program through Married to the Ring. The program was designed for women who are single, who are seeking to prepare themselves for marriage, and or if they're seeking to have an opportunity to engage in some more self-reflection, to learn about, who they are, kind of put some things in place as far as helping to propel them forward in whatever aspect of life that they're seeking healing, health, wholeness. The first phase of the Global 7 program engaged the members in a detox program. That was a 14-day process in which it was intended to strip us down to our base, to our most vulnerable state, and then help to rebuild us, to unearth all of those things that have been blocking us, that have been holding us back from the greatness that God has, that we know that God has planted within each of us.